So it's Tuesday, June the 2nd, and I'm going to be returning to the Mecklenburg County Jail to provide some more tutelage on this course that we created, which is to prepare from success, how to prepare for success from jail or a prison. And I'm basing all of this on lessons that I have learned during the 26 years that I served. So this is all really going through the straight A guide, and we are still in the prerequisite stage. We had a great session yesterday where we spoke about values. I introduced myself to them, and today we're going to continue training on the importance of goals. And this is really crucial, particularly during this time. Again, I'm filming this during June the 2nd, 2020, when we've really got a series of problems going on around the country. We've got 40 million people unemployed. We have got social unrest across the country, people responding to the tragedy and the injustice of the murder of this person, Floyd, in Minneapolis, who is just really ignited a sense of anger and unrest across the country, where people are burning down buildings. We also have a pandemic going on, and who's going to get the brunt of all of this? A lot of it is going to be formerly incarcerated people or people that are transitioning to society. So it's so incredibly urgent that people really learn, particularly in jail and prison, learn, how do I prepare myself for success, and how do I overcome and live in the world as it exists rather than as I want it to be. Certainly it's not fair that people in jail or in prison are going to have a harder time getting into the job market, but it would be irresponsible of me, as somebody who went through 26 years in prison, to not help people understand this is what's coming. Figure out how to prepare. Learn how to identify success. Create a series of goals that will help advance your pathway there. Because the reality is we live in a world that in many ways is heartless. I mean, we've got trouble and trauma all across the country, but simultaneously you see the stock market rising. What is that telling us? The stock market is looking at business. It is not looking at social injustice. It is not looking at fairness. It is looking at how am I going to make money? And that is the mindset that really empowered me through prison. Is I understood I made really bad decisions as a kid. The world is going to look at me differently, but I'm going to figure out how to succeed anyway. And so every single day I'm saying, I'm never going to depend on the government. I'm going to figure out how to do it myself. And that's why I'm so passionate about trying to share this with people in jails and prisons across America. And I've got super exciting news in that I am going to be interviewing really successful people out here who are going to tell the stories about how they built their businesses. And these aren't people with medical degrees or law degrees or graduate degrees. These are people that just had a solid work ethic, that just knew how to go out and get it done. And so when I bring this into the jail and the prison, what do? I help people shift their mindset and stop thinking about, oh my God, the troubles and the trauma of my life, but instead saying, no, I've got to plant a seed today, and I got to start building a pathway to success. And that is the whole mindset of the Straight A Guide. So today's lesson, and I want to say I've got a new sponsor, so I'm super excited about that. CBDTV.com is now sponsoring me, which is kind of ironic because this is a time when a lot of people may be needing CBD. They may be wanting to just kind of decompress because the world is changing. But at the end of the day, we've got to be thinking about what are we doing to succeed? What are we doing to prepare? And that's why I'll start this lesson off with a little bit of a recap today about values. And then I'll ask the guys a little bit about, what steps can a person today begin taking to position themselves for success after jail. I want people to begin thinking about that. And so I'll question them a little bit that. Well, what can you do today to influence the probation officer that you're going to meet at some point in your future? What can you do today to influence the employer that you're eventually going to meet in your future? What are you going to do today to influence the businesses that you want to create in your future? Who are your avatars? Who is your market? Who are the people that you are trying to influence? To the extent that a person starts thinking about that at the earliest stage of the journey, that person begins restoring confidence. That person begins creating a plan. That person all of a sudden kind of liberates himself. He's not only a prisoner anymore, but he's somebody who's building his own life. And once that person has done that, and we'll transition here about 6:20 this morning. I'm recording this at 5:20 in the morning, just kind of preparing. But at 6:20 in the morning, which is 9:20 Eastern time, we're going to transition really into the importance of goals. because our goals have to relate to how we define success. Then we help people understand what is a goal. We've got to make sure that they are very specific. We've got to make sure that those goals are measurable. So I'll talk about that. We've got to talk about how they need to be action-oriented. They're not something that you just say, oh, I'm going to be successful when I get out of here. You've got to have some action component tied to the goals that you're setting. They have to be realistic. If you're not ready for prime time, then the goal might be, what do I need to do to get ready for prime time? Do I need to get a GED? Do I need to become more comfortable writing sentences and paragraphs, or putting together a work resume, or transitioning or figuring out how am I going to make a presentation to a future employer? These goals have to be time bound. I'm going to hit these very specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-bound goals. I want people to understand, how do I articulate that? That's what helps them move the needle in their life. And so from 6:45 to 7 o'clock, I'm going to transition this. So let's talk about what goals we can set while we are in custody, and then what types of goals should we maybe working toward once we get out of custody. Because I'm speaking to a group of people, some of whom will be getting out in the next month, some of whom may not be getting out for 10 years or longer. So then at 7 o'clock Pacific time, 10 o'clock Eastern time, we'll be taking about a 15-minute hiatus or break. But of course, I'm always working during that time, so I'm going to make myself available to respond to questions that the people have. Then we're going to move on to the assessments. It's really important, in my opinion, and this is what guided me, was to always hold ourselves accountable. So we've created this assessment metric, and I want to kind of go through that assessment metric with them with regard to how they're setting their goals and determine, are they scoring, on the 90 to 100 point sector of this assessment schedule, because it's a 100-point measurement, or are they in the 20 to 30-point measurement, which really requires us to be thinking again and making more improvements. Then at 7:30 to 7:40, I really want to hit back on this three-legged stool. I used this in my analogy yesterday, and I used actually my phone here as an example. I told them, to be successful, we can think about this three-legged stool. Whoever the engineer was that designed this, they made it 3 legs, because with 3 legs, this thing will stand on a desk, right? But without 3 legs, if one of these legs gets knocked off, this thing's going to fall over. And it doesn't matter which one it is. If you don't have all 3 of them, this thing doesn't stand. 4-leg might be even better, but let's start with 3. So I tell the guys in the class is that if you want to be successful in your pathway of overcoming the stigma of jail, if you want to be ready to come back and be strong in this era of a pandemic, this era of 40 million people unemployed, this era of social unrest, this era of mass incarceration, what do you have to do? You have to have your 3-legged stool. That means that you've got to have a strategy, and that strategy you have to document that strategy. Can't just talk about it, got to be about it. You create a strategy of what you're going to do, and you document it. 2, you've got to create your tools and tactics, right? I never ask anybody to do anything that I am not doing. I am showing them these tools and tactics that I create. These helped me not only while going through 26 years in prison, but they've helped me make millions of dollars since I've come out of prison. And so it's really important for people to understand. Create your tools, create your tactics, make sure that they relate to your strategy and you document it. And then 3, you got to hold yourself accountable. You've got to have these assessments that help you measure your progress. And so this pathway of your 3-legged stool is really essential, both in identifying your values, but also in setting your goals. Otherwise, you're this person who's obsessed with the news and talking about what's going on, but you're not doing anything about it. And that's pathetic. So we can't be pathetic. We've got to be action-oriented. We've got to have a plan. We've got to live in the world as it exists. That's the total essence of the Straight A Guide. That's what got me through 26 years in prison. So I want people thinking about the goals that they are going to set before sentencing. I want them to identify the goals that they should set after sentencing. And I want them to be talking about what goals am I going to be pursuing after my release, because it's a series of incremental goals. And to the extent that we relate them to the values by which we live, the success strategy that we're about, that's when we really position ourselves to thrive, even in this era of chaos that we're going through right now. At least that's what I've found. And I want to thank CBDTV.com for sponsoring me and allowing me to get into more jails and prisons across America.